I think that also comes very much into it, is that we hide a lot of things under the carpet, but many women have been through some form of sexual trauma. So I think that's where there's also this feeling of cutting ourselves off from our sensuality, our sexuality, our pleasure, and I think we've become domesticated, and there's this whole talk about rewilding, but I also often feel that it goes so far to an extreme that it feels to a point that a lot of everyday women feel like, well, that just feels too wild, and really finding this balance of like, how do we bring pleasure into everyday life? How do we bring that into feeling that we're allowed to be sensual, sexual beings, as mothers, as work, as whatever we're doing in the world, we are allowed to do that. And it doesn't have to be that it becomes so far out that you feel uncomfortable, but I feel like we're missing a whole part of ourselves. We cut a whole part of ourselves off because we of these things. Yeah,
absolutely. And I love that you brought that up, because isn't it interesting that if ever we encountered, especially as girls being curious about their own sexuality, they would immediately become labeled as the bad girls.
Welcome to the Wildflower Diaries Show, where we have meaningful conversations and contemplations to bring you back to life. I'm Beth Schneider, your host and guide, to help you along your healing journey and to really start living life fully. We have forgotten that we are the builders, creators, weavers, lovers, visionaries and dreamers. Through these discussions, learn and implement practices to remember and reconnect to all of who you are. Your body, intuition, power, heart, voice, mind and magic are ready to be reclaimed so that you can make ripple effects of change that you know deep down you are made for. Let's get started with this week's episode.
So I'm very excited today to be with Sonja. And we're going to be having a conversation to bring us back to life. And this is episode 4. And Sonja, I met quite a while ago now, and doing a vision board workshop that really actually brought something alive in me. And I've just kept in touch and looking what she's been up to, and there's been a big expansion in her work. So I'm excited to chat with Sonja today. And welcome, Sonja.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Beth. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you.
So, yes, you and I met when I was hosting a vision board workshop, and you signed up for the workshop. And when I started my business, that was what I was doing for a few years, actually. I hosted vision board workshops and journaling workshops.
Yes.
And when COVID hit in 2020, I had just finished my coaching certification. But COVID gave me the opportunity to take my workshops online. I was going to move away from the workshops. That was the plan. But then I was like, okay, here's an opportunity to do the workshops online. And then I did that for the rest of 2020. But then in the beginning of 2021, I really wanted to start concentrating on my coaching practice. And that is what I've been doing for these past 2 years. And I call myself the Pussy Catalyst, because what I do is I support women to connect to their pussy intuition. And yes, that is mainly what my coaching is about.
Yes, and this is why I was so excited to have this conversation. Is number one, the whole episode's around reclaiming your intuition. But I purposely haven't put on pussy intuition, because that is a word we really need to start chatting about. And even like I was mentioning earlier to you, like how you get this little giggle inside of you, like a young girl who feels like a slightly uncomfortable when they hear that word. So where did that come into the work? How did that come about?
Yes. So back in 2020, I signed up for a course because I was so intrigued. The course was called Pussy-Based Business School. And
sorry, again, I'm giggling already, which is amazing. I love it. Yeah.
And I was intrigued. I was like, wow, gosh, this is quite out there. And I was very curious about it. And I attended this course and I was introduced to this book called Pussy, a Reclamation by Regina Thomas-Schauer, who also goes by the name of Mama Gina. And she was speaking about pussy intuition and how this is, as women, really the center of our being. And I was like, okay, you know, I'm not sure. I couldn't even say the word pussy out loud at the time. And when people would ask me about this course that I was doing, I'd refer to it as its name, P School. And they'd be like, oh, what it's about. And, you know, my reaction would be, you sure you want to know?
Yeah.
But it really is about us starting to reclaim this word, firstly, and this part of our body. And yes, the word pussy is so loaded. It's quite triggering. It's quite jarring. You always get a response when I always get a response when I say this to people, you know?
Yes.
And some laugh, some are like, what? You know, some look at me funny. I've had it all.
Yeah.
And I always let them know, yes, this is the word. This landed for me, and I'll share more about how a little bit later on. But initially, I too couldn't say the word. And I had to learn to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a huge part of it, is that being okay with being uncomfortable. And when you have a word like this come up, being intrigued by, like, why does it make me feel so uncomfortable?
Yes.
And often it makes us feel uncomfortable because our body as women has been objectified. So we are going to be feeling like, oh, well, that word's naughty and bad and dirty. And that's because we've been objectified and made to be often throughout history just objects for the use of men and for the use of everyone else to make sure everyone else is okay. And I think that is often, you know, when I sat with the word, I was like, wow, actually, it's got so much more to do with the fact that we have just been made to feel that we're just there to give, and give, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, even as growing up as young girls, often we are not even, we don't even call our genitalia by its actual name.
Yeah.
You know, we get told these acceptable words. You know?
Yes.
Because vulva or vagina or pussy is just not acceptable. And we get taught all the so-called acceptable cute names like Fanny or whatever the name is. I'm sure we all have
a name for it.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes. Right?
Yes.
And then we perpetuate that. We do the same for our girls, our children. And we teach them whatever the name is, or when they get curious about it, we stop them, you know, and because there is so much shame associated with our genitals, with our vulva.
Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
And it's up to us to start reclaiming that and to start working with the shame,
definitely. And you know, and this is a trigger warning when I'm because I'm going to now speak about, you know, trauma, but you know, I think that also comes very much into it, is that we hide a lot of things under the carpet, but many women have been through some form of sexual trauma. So I think that's where there's also this feeling of cutting ourselves off from our sensuality, our sexuality, our pleasure, and I think we've become domesticated, and there's this whole talk about rewilding that I also often feel that it goes so far to an extreme that it feels to a point that a lot of everyday women feel like, well, that just feels too wild, and really finding this balance of like, how do we bring pleasure into everyday life? How do we bring that into feeling that we're allowed to be essential sexual beings, as mothers, as work, as whatever we're doing in the world, we are allowed to do that. And it doesn't have to be that it becomes so far out that you feel uncomfortable, but I feel like we're missing a whole part of ourselves. We cut a whole part of ourselves off because we of these things.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up, because isn't it interesting that if ever we encountered, especially as girls being curious about their own sexuality, they would immediately become labeled as the bad girls, the slutty girls. They'd always be, so you don't want to be like that, or if you like that, there's something wrong with you. And immediately there's shame attached to it. So anyone who, even when you start to feel something happening in your own body as a girl, and someone says, oh, well, girls who do things like that are like this, then you're like, oh, okay, so is that not allowed?
Yes.
And boom, shame. And that's how it starts. And then you get curious and you ask questions and you get shut down most of the time. I think it's getting better now, but I know from, and I grew up in the 80s. It was never something that was talked about or encouraged. In conversations.
And
so,
sorry.
If you were curious, where would you get your information? There wasn't an internet back then.
There wasn't a place to get the information. And I think also, like, every country has, like, South Africa is a conservative country. Like, I think, that's and there's definitely many countries all over the world that are still very conservative, and I think that also brings a whole level of, like, it was just not something that gets spoken about, except for in your school at the guidance, there's one time that you get this really weird class and everyone's like, what's this about? And it just felt weird and everyone laughed, and it just was never something that then afterwards you felt like you could really talk about,
Absolutely. And also, yes, in South Africa there was definitely this conservative thing, and then also very religious. So the two went sort of hand in hand, conservative, religious. So sex and procreating was about having a family. And that's it. Well, nothing else. We never spoke about, okay, so the woman's pleasure or any of those things were just never a thing that was ever considered.
She's like, no, not for you.
No. And so we have become so disconnected from this part of us. And so now it's about getting back to and reclaiming and becoming curious and starting to have the conversations. Coming back to our body, experiencing pleasure. And how can we invite more pleasure into our lives? And when I say pleasure in the sense, it's not just about sexual pleasure, but pleasure on the whole.
Yes. And that was the first thing I think that popped into my mind, is the word pleasure is so linked to sexual pleasure that we don't realize that pleasure is so much more than that. It's like, what do we forget through all our senses? Pleasure is also got to do with being out in nature. Like, it can be whatever it means for you, but it's like, how do we make life sensual again and feel alive, because I think we've cut ourselves off so much from actual living that that pleasure is just this thing that you get every now and again, and most of the time It's sexual, and that's not exactly what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be so much deeper than that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think what we've been conditioned to believe is that pleasure is a reward for something.
Yes, 100%.
So we have to do something first, usually some kind of work that we don't necessarily want to do or like to do. And then if we've done it, if we've been good, then we'll get the pleasure reward, whatever that looks like. And so that's the pattern. And so we believe that, okay, so pleasure's on the other side of the thing that I have to get through. Instead of, how can I invite pleasure into my daily routine?
Yes, definitely.
How can pleasure become a practice?
Yes.
And so that's the invitation, really, to invite pleasure in, because pleasure is about the senses.
And I love that you say practice, because that's something I also really like saying to people, is that practice means you can get it wrong sometimes. You can forget to do it, you'll slip, because we're so conditioned to do the opposite. So keep practicing, keep bringing it in, keep saying, oh, why am I feeling like this? When did I last do something that made me feel joy or pleasure or what have you? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, for me, it's just already such a pleasure practice. And I did it before I came on the call with you today, right? I put on my favorite song and I moved my body.
Yes.
And then when I sat down, I lit a candle, which is another one of my favorite pleasure practices. And then I put my favorite hand cream on, and I sat here and I just enjoyed the sensation, the feeling, the smell, all pleasure.
Yes.
Simple.
Yes, because we overcomplicate it. We think, okay, so now it needs to be, now I need to go make this hour to find pleasure, when it's actually like taking like micro moments in your life and adding the pleasure kind of into your daily life. Yeah.
Into your daily routine, making it a practice. And we can do it. It can take literally seconds.
Yes.
Seconds. It doesn't have to be this big thing.
Yes.
And the more we incorporate the little moments like that, enjoying our coffee or our tea first thing in the morning, pleasure practice right there.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do in the morning is to sit with my dogs on the couch and we do our couch cuddles. It is just such a joyful pleasure practice for all three of us.
I love it. Yeah.
And it's those little things, right? And it's not about perfection.
Yeah.
It's about just making it part of the routine and getting the joy and the pleasure.
Yeah, and I think that's something we were talking earlier about, the messiness of life, and how we've made we've with social media, with comparison that happens in general, we've kind of, we don't allow ourselves the messiness. We want to try and fix the messiness and have control over the messiness of life. But life is going to always be a little bit messy, and you go through these big transition periods. Everything goes up in the air. It feels like you're like, how am I ever going to get out of this? And that's normal, and we need to normalize that there's magic in all of that, because when you find yourself, when all of things come up like that, you find yourself within that. And perfection is really just like a trauma response, is what I've realized. It's this wanting to feel like what's going to happen next, so I'll make it all in the neat rows. And that is probably one of the biggest killers of pleasures, trying to control your pleasure,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Perfection is pleasure killer. Right there.
Yeah.
I love that. Yes.
Wow. And what I really interested in understanding from how you work is like, how does I have to say the word now, but how does pussy and intuition come together? How does that help you reclaim your intuition? So that would be great to understand, like,
awesome.
How to do that.
So yes, such a great question. Thank you. And so really just understanding that it's so easy for us to accept heart-centered or gut-centered, right? Which are both parts of our bodies, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, when I first heard of pussy intuition, I was like, I'm comfortable with calling myself heart-centered. And for me, I was convinced that my intuition was a heart-centered intuition, right? Because that feels comfortable, accepted. And I read the book, understood it to a degree, but it felt for me like, no, that's too uncomfortable for me to feel as though pussy and intuition could be connected. Yes, in my mind, I could like, yeah, okay, could make sense, but for me, heart works better, feels better. But being an intuitive human, there was this niggle.
Yeah.
And I was sitting with my coach in a session one day, and it literally just landed in my body in the session. And it was, actually, your intuition is pussy intuition.
I can actually get a bit of goosebumps,
Yes.
like how that must have felt in that moment. Yeah.
And it felt very expansive. I felt that feeling throughout my body. Said I verbalized it, and then immediately went into a space of contraction because I was like, okay, now what?
Yes.
You know? And my coach really held me through that. And she gave me some homework to do that helped me say the word, right? So my action was stand in front of the mirror, say the word out loud to yourself. I had to send voice notes to my husband, voice notes to my sister, just saying the word over and over again, over and over again, so that I could get used to the word. Because yes, now for me, this is what's coming through, but I can't even say it. So can we start there with the practice?
Yeah.
Great, got it. And of course, the more I started practicing it, saying it, I started feeling it. And it was beginning to make so much sense because pussy is really the center. It's where all life begins. It is the birthplace of our creativity, literally creation. And the more I started to explore it, I was like, oh, but of course, all of this is just, I could feel it. It was just in my body. And yes, it took me a while to feel, and like I said to you earlier, there are days when saying it out loud feels like uncomfortable because I know the reactions that I get.
Yes.
But I am reminded every time. And this past week was just so many confirmations for me. I mean, the fact that we are having this conversation today.
Yeah.
Sonja, this is the work. Speak about it. Say the word. Pussy intuition. Get women back to reconnect to their pussies, to their intuitive center.
Yes, and it's been cut off on purpose. We need to accept that it was cut off on purpose because it's power if you connect to that. It's like
So much.
Yeah. And creation is what's going to get us to evolve as humanity. If we don't create something new, we're going to implode, and it's really about how do we create something new. Wow. And I'm actually a little bit like, this is amazing. And it's weird because a question came down to me yesterday, and something I was at some point going to actually add on to put out there is are you willing to let go of being normal in order to really be who you are? Like, because this is what stops us, is saying these words, putting it out there, who we've come here to be, how we want to help people, and those words are actually the things that we need to reclaim. Those are the things that we need to be. Whenever someone sees something and they're like, that's not for me, that is 100% for you. I keep saying this to people. It's like, whatever you turn your eye to or feel uncomfortable with, it's an invitation, really,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is it. It is an invitation. Can we start to get even a little bit more curious?
Yes.
If this word is so triggering to you, can you start to explore, why is that?
Yes.
Where does that come from? Is that a belief that you're holding onto and calling it your truth? Or is it really your truth?
Yeah.
And just uncover, explore, become curious. Because I've noticed when women start to have these conversations, something shifts.
Yeah.
Something shifts.
Yeah. No, 100%. I actually myself personally right now just felt a shift when I was just like, yes, it's creation. It's all about creation, and at the end of the day, like, we've just cut ourselves off from that. We think creativity is also another thing that's been completely distorted and made into like,
yes,
you have to be creative. We all are creative. We all are here to create something,
We all are here to create.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And why would we have been created with this pleasure center right here if we were not supposed to use the power of it?
Yeah. Yes.
Really connect into it. Why would that be? And so that is the question to then start, okay, so why is it? Why have I been so cut off? Why have I bought into this being a place where it's a no-no, where it's actually an insult when you say, don't be such a pussy,
Oh, yes. I mean, even that's, and that's something that's so, even for men, that's just, it's been used so badly towards men too, to be like, man up, sort yourself out, like, why are you being like that, and it's something that's been weaponized against everyone.
Yes, it has been.
Yeah.
So why? The question that keep coming back to is why? And why for you? That is the invitation.
Yeah.
Why for you? Can you see what that's about for you? Can you start to explore what that's about for you? Simple as that. Because once each of us start to look at, why is this word so triggering to me? Why am I carrying so much shame? Where does that come from? And we all start our own journey of becoming curious.
Yes.
That in itself will be a transformation.
Ooh, wow. This conversation has also lit me up, I must say. It's like, it really also, like, as a healer, I understand that often underneath the curiosity is trauma, and that is where people then shy away because it feels too scary to go look at some of the big things that have cut us off, but how much of my life are we actually missing out on because we're holding on to these things instead of actually healing and reclaiming ourselves and I was in a class the other day, and it really, one thing that's really stuck to me is like the revolution and the evolution of humanity is going to start also in the home, you know. And if as moms and as women, we are often a part of the leadership in our home, you know, and how can we show that we're more than just these roles to our children, you know, whether you have male or female children or non-binary, or, you know, whatever your children are choosing to identify as, showing them that it's possible to be yourself, you know, possible to create from within yourself. And I think this was something else I loved what you were talking about a bit earlier, was coming back into the body, you know, and often that's also from trauma that we've come out of our bodies, that we've left our bodies. So this coming back in and coming home, that really feels like a lot about what of the work that you're doing, you know.
Absolutely. And so here's what I know for sure. Often, again, as part of our conditioning, we've been taught that our body is not a safe place. Mm-hmm. Especially if our bodies don't look like the perfect body. Coming back to perfection. And then we internalize that, and we, okay, so if I don't look a certain way, then this body, it is something wrong with this body. And so we start to not feel safe in our bodies, because our bodies have let us down. And so how can we start to feel safer in our bodies? Do we even touch our bodies anymore? Do we care about our bodies? Do we look at our bodies? And it really is a process about that coming home. About touching, feeling, looking at each and every part of our body and be like, oh, wow, look what you can do. Look at you allowing me to stand up. Look at you allowing me to write. Look at you allowing me to think, allowing me to speak, whatever that may be. I had come across this beautiful practice that one of my favorite pop stars does. Lizzo is such an icon. And she shared this, and this was a couple of years ago already, how she, and I mean, she is the absolute definition of loving your body, regardless of how your body looks, right? So loving your body where you're at right now. And she used to kiss the parts of the body. So she'd kiss her tummy, kiss her thighs, kiss her arms, or whatever, you know, just sending love and kisses and appreciation to every part of her body. And I thought, wow, that's such a beautiful and powerful practice. Oh, you know? And just doing that is also such a pleasure practice. And I thought, oh, what a great idea to give our bodies some love. Because we don't. It's
so true. And like it's also such a big conversation for women, because often the first thing we do when we try to look after ourselves is the physical exercise, all of that. But what energy are you doing that from? You know, it's such a big question, because often it's to, like you say, look like this one standard mold that most of us are never going to look like. You know what I mean? We're never going to look like that standard mold. And it's so unconscious that we're striving to be better. And, you know, what about just accepting where you're at right now? You know, doesn't mean that you don't need to do something to change it, but you're not going to be giving yourself anything great if you're constantly trying to be better and not just being like, this is who I am in this moment right now, you know. And it's much easier to actually heal and change and grow from that space than it is from this, I must fix this because there's something wrong with it, you know.
Absolutely. Yes. And that is such a big thing. We have been taught and conditioned to fix, and to strive. And if it doesn't look like this, it's wrong, it's unacceptable. And how can we shift that to loving where we're at right now, loving our bodies where our bodies are at right now? And then, sure, if you want to do something different, to do it from that place.
Yeah.
But to start with how can I love my body where it's at right now? Because that helps with the reconnecting to the body.
Yeah. And it's integral what you said about this, like not trusting our bodies, not feeling like they keep up with us. They're not doing what we want them to do. And that space is just like, it's harming, and it makes people sick. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it is like, it's not an overnight thing. Like today I accept my body, you know, and some days you'll accept your body more than other days.
Sure.
It's just also a practice, you know, like you say.
It is.
It
is.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we are still bombarded with this perfect body in the media. Yes, that is changing to a degree. And we are seeing more acceptable, or more not acceptable, what's the word I'm looking for, but they are normalizing all types of bodies. And especially retailers, they are creating space for all types of bodies to show up in their windows, which is wonderful, because that's what we want. We want to see representation. Always matters. So that's a great place. We're moving in that direction. But we still see on catwalks and those kinds of things this look that is just not, not the standard. I mean, there's probably 1% of humankind that look like that. And yet we are told that is the ideal, that is the perfect way to look. So it's about changing that narrative.
Yeah, definitely. And now with intuition, with pussy intuition, if someone has started that journey of reclaiming that, like what's going to happen for them? Like what can they expect for themselves if they were to do something like that?
Yes. So it's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But my invitation to anyone who is starting this journey of, okay, I'm curious about this pussy intuition, is to stay curious, right? To really start looking at how it is that you can reconnect to your body in the smallest ways. Because it's all about coming back to your body. Because this is where your intuition is. We think often that intuition is out there, but our intuition is here in us. And one of the easiest ways for me to connect into my intuition when I'm feeling overwhelmed or scattered or all over the place is to take a moment to close my eyes and to breathe into my womb space and my pussy space. And just feeling that connection, allowing that breath to flow in and out, taking a moment just for me, touching my body. I love rubbing my hands at the top of my thigh. It's just such a soothing connection for me. And it feels even better when I close my eyes. And doing that intentionally, and as often as we remember. And trusting that our intuition will come through for us. And it's not always about hearing, because people often think that they need to hear their intuition. Sometimes it's about sensations, ideas, images, visual, those kinds of things. Because when we think that our intuition is always going to be something that we hear, often there's this other voice that could show up. That is the voice of our inner critic, yes.
The mind.
And we're like,
yeah.
And that inner critic is saying to us, stay in your comfort zone, stay in your comfort zone.
This is a bad idea. Cut that one out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So that voice, and especially when we're just starting on this intuitive journey, our inner critic's voice can be quite loud.
Yeah.
And I always invite my clients to practice turning down the volume of that voice.
Yes.
Because that voice is used to running the show. So just inviting them to turn down the volume of that voice so that we can start connecting to the intuitive wisdom.
Beautiful. Yeah. I love it. I love it. And I suppose this is a good time to ask you. So this is conversations to bring you back to life. So yeah, this is bringing people back to life, really, is breath, like breathing, coming back into your body, experiencing being here right now, like not being present somewhere else, not being here. This is where life is happening. It's not happening maybe tomorrow when I get this, or when I get there, when I do that. It's happening right now. We're missing out on it. Really coming back here to your body, to yourself, and living. Absolutely. I really love that. Yeah.
Yes. So being present is, and breath allows us to be present. And so does pleasure, because pleasure engages the senses, and engaging the senses allows us to be present in the moment. So those are the little things that allow us to be here right now. And that's where life is happening.
Yes.
Here, right now.
I love this. I love this so much. So how can people get in touch with you? And what would you like to leave? Would you like to leave people with something, and then let everyone know how they can get in touch with you? And I'll also obviously post all of your details underneath all the episodes, but yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yes, if you would like to get hold of me, I'm on Instagram at I am Sonja McKaiser. I am on Facebook at Sonja McKaiser Coaching and Facilitation. And I have a website, which is www.sonjamakaiser.com. And yes, what I would like to leave you with is, and we have touched on it in our conversation today, if the word pussy triggers you in any way, my invitation to you is to become curious as to why, and really start to explore that. Ask yourself the question. If you are a journaler like me, pull out your journal, write down the question, why is this word pussy triggering me? And then see what comes up.
Yes.
Explore and become curious. And of course, if you have any questions, pop me a DM. Yeah. I love to engage with people who are curious about it. And I'm open to having the conversation.
Yeah, and I'm going to go journal myself about that, because, I've definitely, the sense I always get is that little girl giggle, and that's, you have to dig deeper into that, because that we've been made to continuously stay in this maiden and not mature into the mother where intuition is,
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation, Sonja. I so appreciate you. And yeah, this work you're doing is so necessary. I'm really can't wait to carry on watching your journey. And soon enough, we're going to be in the same city. So I'm excited.
Yay! Can't wait for that. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for this invitation. And it's, as always, such a pleasure to connect with you and to have this conversation. Thank you so much for being open to it.
No, thank you. Love it too. Okay, cool. We'll chat soon. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.